All right, hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. This time we're going to be exploring the fascinating world of heart rate regulation, our guide for this journey. Well, it's a physiology handout about heart rate regulation prepared by Dr. Rasha Eldeeb. And let me tell you, this thing is packed with some seriously cool insights that go way beyond just counting those beats per minute. So get ready to discover the amazing systems that keep your heart ticking in perfect rhythm.
Yeah, what people often don't realize is that heart rate, it's more than just, a number on a screen. It's like this um, dynamic window into your body's overall state, a reflection of like how you're feeling, what you're doing, even what you're thinking.
Okay, so let's start with something everyone can relate to, right? Resting heart rate. For most adults, it's somewhere between 60 and 90 beats per minute. It's kind of like your heart's resting metabolism, a good sign that your cardiovascular system is in tip-top shape.
Mm.
But of course, there are always some interesting variations.
Absolutely. Like take babies, for instance. They have these crazy fast heart rates, often around 120 beats per minute. It's because they haven't fully developed the same level of vagal tone that adults have.
Vagal tone. Is that some kind of musical term for the heart?
Haha, not quite. It basically refers to the parasympathetic nervous system's calming influence on the heart, sort of like a gentle break, Babies are still developing this system, so the heart rates are naturally a bit higher. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, you've got athletes with those remarkably slow resting heart rates, thanks to like a super strong vagal tone from all that training.
So it's almost like their hearts are just like super efficient, needing fewer beats to pump the same amount of blood.
Exactly. And it's not just about individual differences either. Our heart rates, they also fluctuate throughout the day, changing even when we just stand up after lying down.
So it's like it's constantly adapting, responding to all these internal and external cues. But how does it actually know what to do? Who's calling the shots, so to speak?
Well, the conductor of this whole intricate orchestra is the autonomic nervous system, with its two branches, sympathetic and parasympathetic. You can think of them as like the gas pedal and brake of your heart.
Ah, okay. So when we encounter a stressful situation, like say, a big presentation at work or a near miss on the freeway, the sympathetic nervous system kicks in.
Exactly. Sympathetic nerves release norepinephrine, which is basically like adrenaline for the heart. It increases heart rate and blood pressure to prepare you to face that challenge.
So it's like our body's ancient fight or flight response in action, getting us ready to either tackle the threat head on or, run for the hills.
Precisely. And while the sympathetic system's busy revving things up, the parasympathetic system, mainly through the vagus nerve, acts as that calming influence, slowing things down and promoting relaxation.
And this constant back and forth between the two, that's what keeps our heart rate balanced, right? Like a constant tug of war, but instead of muscles, it's our nervous system.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. This tug of war is happening all the time, both systems always active to some degree, constantly fine-tuning your heart rate based on your needs. And there's actually a fascinating twist when it comes to skeletal muscles during exercise.
Oh, what do you mean? I thought exercise was all about like the sympathetic system going into overdrive.
It is, but there's an exception. So while the sympathetic system usually constricts blood vessels, skeletal muscles have these special sympathetic nerves that actually dilate them.
Really? Why would they do that? Isn't the goal to like shunt blood to vital organs during fight or flight?
Right, but during exercise, your muscles become those vital organs. They need that surge of oxygen-rich blood to keep them going. It's a really remarkable adaptation to ensure they get the resources they need to perform.
Wow. Our bodies are so clever. So we had this autonomic nervous system controlling the heart. But where do the commands actually originate? Is there like a mission control for heart rate?
There is. It's located in a part of the brain called the medulla oblongata, which houses what we call the cardiovascular centers. This includes the vasomotor center, or VMC, and the cardioinhibitory center, the CIC.
Okay. So these centers are constantly receiving information and like making those adjustments to heart rate. It's almost like the brain's way of saying, okay, speed up, or all right, slow down, depending on what's going on.
Exactly. The VMC, you can think of it kind of like a control panel with two main settings. It's got accelerate, which increases heart rate and constricts those blood vessels, and then brake, which promotes dilation and lowers blood pressure. Meanwhile, the CIC, as the name suggests, acts mainly to slow down the heart through the vagus nerve.
So it's like this constant back and forth between these two centers, this finely tuned balancing act to keep your heart rate in check.
Precisely. And what's really fascinating is that these centers, they don't operate in isolation. They're constantly getting input from various parts of the brain and body, which influences how they control your heart rate.
So it's not just about what's happening in the heart itself, but also what's going on in the rest of the body, even in our minds.
Exactly. Our thoughts, emotions, even just the simple act of breathing can all affect our heart rate. It's this truly remarkable system of interconnectedness.
This is blowing my mind a little. Okay,
Yeah.
so let's talk about those outside influences. What kind of signals is the medulla getting from other parts of the brain?
Well, I mean, let's start with the most obvious, right? Our emotions. You know how your heart races when you're excited or
Oh,
anxious?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Butterflies in the stomach, heart pounding in my chest. It's all part of the experience.
Exactly. So that's your cerebral cortex, the part of your brain responsible for conscious thought and emotion. It sends signals to the hypothalamus, a key center for emotional expression. Then the hypothalamus, it relays those signals to the cardiac centers in the medulla, ultimately affecting your heart rate.
So it's like this chain reaction, starting with a thought or a feeling,
Mm.
then triggering this whole cascade of uh, physiological responses, including changes in our heart rate.
Precisely. And it's not just like immediate emotions, even conditioned reflexes. Those learned through repeated experience can play a part.
Conditioned reflexes,
Yeah.
like Pavlov's dogs drooling at the sound of a bell. What does that have to do with heart rate?
Well, imagine an athlete at the starting line of a big race, right? Their heart rate starts to climb even before they've taken a single step. Their brains learn to associate that situation with intense physical exertion, and it triggers a preemptive response, including an increase in heart rate.
So it's like our brains are constantly learning and adapting, even shaping our cardiovascular responses based on past experiences. That's
Huh.
amazing. What other surprising brain-heart connections are there?
Well, have you ever noticed how your heart rate seems to speed up just slightly when you inhale and slow down when you exhale?
Hmm. Now that you mention it, yeah, I think I have.
Mm.
I just always assumed it was like random variation.
It's not random at all. It's a perfectly normal phenomenon called respiratory sinus arrhythmia. And it's actually controlled by direct communication between the part of the brain that controls breathing, the inspiratory center, and the cardioacceleratory center in the medulla. It's a way of optimizing blood flow during the breathing cycle.
So even something as basic as breathing is intricately tied to heart rate regulation. It's incredible how many different factors are at play here. What about feedback from within the cardiovascular system itself? What role does that play?
That's where those pressure sensors we mentioned earlier come in. The arterial baroreceptors. They're like the body's internal blood pressure monitors, strategically located in the walls of major arteries.
So they're constantly sensing those changes in blood pressure and sending that information back to the medulla.
Exactly. As blood pressure goes up, the arterial walls stretch, which stimulates those baroreceptors. They then send signals to the cardiac centers, stimulating the cardioinhibitory center and inhibiting the vasomotor center.
So it's like a negative feedback loop. Increased blood pressure triggers a response to bring it back down, and vice versa.
Precisely. It's a crucial mechanism for maintaining that blood pressure stability. It's actually known as Mary's Law.
Mary's Law. Okay, got it. But what happens when someone has chronically high blood pressure, like in hypertension? Do those baroreceptors just like keep firing nonstop?
That's where things get a bit more complicated. In chronic hypertension, the baroreceptors actually adapt to that elevated pressure and kind of adjust their set point.
So they sort of like reset themselves to that higher pressure.
Exactly. It's one of the reasons why hypertension can be so tricky to manage.
Hmm.
The body, in a sense, gets used to that higher pressure and doesn't try as hard to lower it.
That's fascinating, but also kind of scary. It really highlights how important it is to prevent and manage high blood pressure.
Hmm.
Now, you mentioned that baroreceptor activity is also tied to vagal tone, that calming influence of the parasympathetic nervous system. Can you maybe elaborate on that a bit?
Sure. So each time your heart beats, ventricular contraction causes a surge in blood pressure, right? This stimulates the arterial baroreceptors, which then activate the cardioinhibitory center, increasing vagal nerve activity.
So vagal tone isn't just a constant state, but it's more of a dynamic response to blood pressure fluctuations,
Yeah.
constantly adjusting to keep things in balance.
Exactly. But what happens when there's too much vagal stimulation? Can that be a problem?
That's a great question. I would think too much of a brake on the heart could be dangerous.
It can be. Excessive vagal stimulation can slow the heart rate down way too much, disrupting the heart's rhythm, especially for the sinoatrial node, which is like the heart's natural pacemaker.
So what happens then? Does the heart just stop?
Thankfully, no. The ventricles, which are the heart's main pumping chambers, they have a backup plan. In a phenomenon called vagal escape, they basically break free from that overwhelming vagal influence and start beating at their own slower rhythm. It's called the idioventricular rhythm.
So it's like the heart has this built-in safety mechanism to prevent it from completely stopping. That's incredible.
It is. Our bodies are truly amazing in their ability to adapt and, maintain function, even in the face of challenges. Now, we've talked about the arterial baroreceptors, but there are other sensors at play within the cardiovascular system as well.
Oh, right. You're talking about those atrial stretch receptors, right? The ones that monitor blood volume in the heart's atria.
Exactly. They're similar to baroreceptors in that they respond to stretch, but their focus is specifically on those changes in blood volume within the atria.
So if the atria are filling up with more blood than usual, these receptors send a signal to, like, speed up the heart rate.
Precisely. This reflex, known as the Bainbridge reflex, is crucial for preventing blood from pooling in the heart. It ensures that as blood flow back to the heart increases, the heart rate also increases to accommodate that extra volume. Think of it kind of like a traffic control system for your heart, making sure that blood keeps flowing smoothly.
Our hearts really do have so many built-in safeguards to keep everything running efficiently. But it's not just about the brain and the heart itself, right? You mentioned that signals from outside the cardiovascular system can also play a role.
Absolutely. Remember those proprioceptors we talked about earlier? The sensors in our muscles and joints that detect movement?
Yeah. Those were involved in the Allen-Smirk reflex, right?
Yeah.
Which kicks in during exercise to increase heart rate.
Right. But their influence goes beyond just like signaling the start of a workout. They're constantly sending feedback to the brain about our body's position and movements.
So even subtle shifts in our posture or muscle activity can impact our heart rate.
That's right. It's like this continuous loop of communication, making sure our cardiovascular system is ready for any changes in physical exertion.
Yeah.
And then there's the fascinating interplay between pain and heart rate.
I would have thought pain would always increase heart rate, kind of like a stress response.
It's not always that simple. Mild to moderate pain on the skin, what we call cutaneous pain, usually does increase heart rate, but severe cutaneous pain can actually cause a decrease in heart rate. It might be a protective mechanism to prevent further injury or blood loss.
So it's not just the presence of pain, but also the type and intensity that matters. What about pain coming from, like, internal organs?
That's called visceral pain, and it often produces a decrease in both heart rate and blood pressure. It's thought to be related to specific pathways in the nervous system that trigger that slowing of the heart.
This is incredible. Our bodies have such a complex way of interpreting pain and responding accordingly.
Right.
It's not just this, like, one-size-fits-all reaction, but a really nuanced response tailored to the specific type of pain we're experiencing.
Exactly, and it highlights how interconnected our nervous system, our perception of pain, and our cardiovascular responses truly are.
Okay, so we've explored the nervous system's role in all its complexity, but what about chemical regulation? Where do hormones and other chemical messengers fit into all of this?
That's where we delve into the world of endocrinology, where chemical signals fine-tune our heart rate, often in conjunction with the nervous system.
It's like this dual control system with both nerves and chemicals working together to orchestrate this incredible symphony of heart rate regulation.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And one of the key players in chemical regulation are the peripheral chemoreceptors. They act as our body's internal blood gas and pH monitors, constantly keeping tabs on those crucial parameters like oxygen, carbon dioxide, and acidity.
So if something's out of whack, like our oxygen levels drop too low, these chemoreceptors are the ones that sound the alarm.
Precisely. They'll send signals to the cardiac centers in the medulla, triggering an increase in both heart rate and respiration to improve oxygen delivery to the tissues. It's like a built-in emergency response system.
Our bodies are so incredibly efficient. But peripheral chemoreceptors aren't the only chemical messengers involved, right? What other hormones are involved in this intricate dance of heart rate regulation?
Well, there are the classic stress hormones, epinephrine and norepinephrine, better known as adrenaline and noradrenaline. They're released during those fight or flight situations, boosting heart rate and blood pressure to prepare us for action.
So that's what gives us that surge of energy and that pounding heart when we're facing a challenge or, feeling stressed.
Exactly. Then there's thyroid hormone, which plays a critical role in regulating metabolism. Elevated levels of thyroid hormone can lead to an increase in heart rate, partly by directly stimulating those pacemaker cells in the heart, and partly by increasing the body's overall metabolic rate.
So if someone has like a hyperactive thyroid, their heart is essentially on overdrive, beating faster even at rest.
That's right. And we can't forget about the influence of medications. Certain drugs, like atropine, which blocks the effects of the parasympathetic nervous system, can significantly increase heart rate.
So atropine essentially removes the brakes on the heart, letting it beat faster.
Exactly. It's often used in medical settings to counteract bradycardia or an abnormally slow heart rate. And believe it or not, even bile salts, those substances involved in digestion, can have an impact on heart rate. They can actually slow it down, which is one reason why people with obstructive jaundice often experience bradycardia.
It's incredible how seemingly unrelated bodily systems can impact something as, as fundamental as heart rate.
It really highlights the incredible interconnectedness of all the systems within our bodies, doesn't it?
It does. But wait, there's more. Right, we haven't even touched on direct regulation, those factors that directly influence the heart's pacemaker cells, the sinoatrial node.
You're right. There's a whole other layer of control happening right at the source of the heartbeat.
Okay, I'm ready for part 2, this deep dive. Let's explore how these direct factors impact the heart's rhythm. All right, so we've taken this incredible journey through the brain and like this vast network of nerves that control our heart rate.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's zoom in on the heart itself. What's happening at the source of that steady beat?
Well, you can think of the heart as having like its own internal control system with the sinoatrial node, or SAN, acting as the primary pacemaker. But this pacemaker isn't isolated. It's incredibly sensitive to various direct influences.
So factors can directly affect the SAN's rhythm without needing to go through the nervous system or hormones. What would be like an example of that?
Think about how your heart races when you have a fever or when you're working out really intensely. That's temperature at play, directly impacting that SAN. Even a small increase in body temperature can significantly speed up your heart rate.
Oh, okay. So a racing heart during a fever isn't just about feeling unwell, but it's the heat itself acting on the heart.
Exactly. It's actually one of the ways our bodies try to dissipate heat. Increased blood flow helps to carry that heat away from our core to the skin where it can be released.
It's like our own internal cooling system kicking into gear.
Yeah.
So what other direct influences are there that affect this SAN?
We touched on the Bainbridge reflex earlier, remember? How increased blood volume stretching the atria can actually directly stimulate the SAN, leading to a faster heart rate.
Right. It's like the heart has its own built-in mechanism to prevent blood from backing up. It senses that increased volume and just like adjusts accordingly.
Precisely. It's a great example of how the heart can self-regulate based on its internal environment. And finally, we can't forget about the impact of blood chemistry.
You're talking about electrolytes, right? I know those are important for, well, all sorts of bodily functions.
They are, and that includes heart function. Changes in the concentration of certain electrolytes, especially potassium, can directly affect the SAN's activity, and that can disrupt the heart's rhythm. That's why maintaining proper electrolyte balance is so crucial.
So it's not just about what we eat and drink in terms of hydration, but also about making sure we're getting the right balance of those electrolytes.
Exactly. It all ties back to that delicate balance our bodies are always striving for, you know? Now, before we move on, I think it's important to take a step back and consider why all of this matters. Why should we care about these intricate details of heart rate regulation?
That's a great point. I mean, it's all fascinating to learn about, but what does it actually mean for us in our daily lives?
Well, for one thing, understanding how our bodies control heart rate gives us a much deeper appreciation for its significance as a vital sign. It's not just a number on a screen. It's this dynamic window into our overall health and well-being.
So paying attention to our heart rate can give us some valuable clues about what's going on inside.
Absolutely. For instance, a consistently elevated heart rate can be a sign of chronic stress. And that can have some pretty serious implications for, our cardiovascular health down the road.
So managing stress isn't just about feeling better mentally, but it's also about protecting our physical health, especially our hearts.
Exactly. And on the flip side, knowing about the calming influence of the parasympathetic nervous system and the vagus nerve has opened up some really exciting possibilities for treatment. Like techniques like vagal nerve stimulation are now being used to treat conditions like epilepsy and depression.
Wow. So we can actually tap into these natural regulatory mechanisms to improve our health in all sorts of ways.
Precisely. And then there's the connection between heart rate and breathing. Techniques like deep, slow breathing can actually stimulate the vagus nerve, which promotes relaxation and lowers heart rate.
So something as simple and accessible as like mindful breathing can have a real physiological impact.
Exactly. It all comes back to that concept of interconnectedness that we've been talking about. Our bodies are these incredibly complex systems, and all the parts work together in these amazing ways.
This deep dive has definitely given me a whole new perspective on heart rate. I'm starting to see it less as just a number and more as this reflection of my overall well-being.
That's the beauty of knowledge, isn't it? It empowers us to understand ourselves better and make more informed choices about our health.
Speaking of informed choices, are there any practical takeaways from all this? Things we can do in our daily lives to like support healthy heart rate regulation?
Well, aside from managing stress and incorporating relaxation techniques, even being mindful of our heart rate during exercise can be really beneficial. Knowing how our heart responds to different levels of exertion allows us to adjust our workouts and avoid overexerting ourselves.
So basically, listen to your body, pay attention to how your heart feels, and don't push yourself beyond your limits.
Exactly. It's all about finding that balance between challenge and recovery.
This has been an amazing journey so far, but before we wrap things up, I have to ask, what about those times when our heart rate seems to have, like, a mind of its own? Those moments where it skips a beat or races for, like, no apparent reason. What's going on there?
Ah, yes. The mysterious world of heart palpitations and arrhythmias. It's a topic worthy of its own deep dive, don't you think?
Heart palpitations and arrhythmias, those sound kind of scary. Are they always a sign of something serious?
Not always. Occasional palpitations, those feelings of skimped beats or like a fluttering in your chest. They're actually pretty common and often totally harmless, especially in younger people. They can be triggered by things like stress, caffeine, even certain medications.
So those moments when I feel like my heart did a flip-flop after one too many cups of coffee, those are probably nothing to worry about.
Most likely not, no. But of course, if you're having them frequently or they're really bothersome, it's always best to check with your doctor just to rule out anything more serious.
That makes sense. So what exactly is an arrhythmia? Is it just another word for palpitations?
An arrhythmia is any abnormality in the heart's rhythm. It's kind of a broader term that includes a whole range of conditions, from those harmless palpitations we talked about to more serious rhythm disturbances that can actually affect how efficiently the heart pumps blood.
So some arrhythmias are just like minor hiccups, while others can be more problematic. What causes those rhythm disruptions?
It's kind of like a glitch in the heart's electrical system. The electrical impulses that control your heartbeat can get disrupted or misfire, leading to those irregular rhythms. And these glitches, they can be caused by all sorts of things: heart disease, electrolyte imbalances, thyroid problems, even some medications.
So it's not always a problem with the heart itself. Sometimes it's something else throwing off that rhythm.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to get a proper diagnosis if you're having persistent arrhythmias. Your doctor can figure out what the underlying cause is and recommend the best treatment.
Makes sense. So it's not like a one-size-fits-all situation, right?
Definitely not. Treatment for arrhythmias really depends on the specific type and how severe it is. Sometimes simple things like lifestyle changes, like reducing stress or cutting back on caffeine are enough. But sometimes medications or even procedures might be necessary.
Wow. It's amazing how much we've learned about heart rate and rhythm in just this one deep dive. It's incredible how complex these systems are and how they're always adapting to keep our hearts going strong.
It really is remarkable. And, while we've covered a lot of ground, there's always more to learn. The science of heart rate regulation is constantly evolving as researchers uncover new insights into this, this vital part of human physiology.
I feel like I've gained a whole new level of awareness and appreciation for my own heartbeat.
That's the power of knowledge. It helps us connect with our bodies on a deeper level to understand that symphony of signals and responses that keeps us going.
So what would you say is the key takeaway here? What should we be thinking about as we go about our day?
I think the most important thing is to listen to your body. Pay attention to your heart rate, but don't get too obsessed with the numbers. Be aware of how it responds to different situations. And if something feels off, don't hesitate to talk to your doctor.
Great advice. Thanks so much for taking us on this fascinating journey through the world of heart rate regulation. It's really been an eye-opener.
My pleasure. And to our listener, thank you so much for joining us on this depth dive. We hope you've gained a new appreciation for the incredible symphony happening inside each and every one of us. Remember, a healthy heart beats to the rhythm of knowledge and self-care. Until next time, stay curious.